Alright, so next in the list we have DNS or domain name system. Let's understand how this works. You go to the browser, you type in facebook.com or instagram.com and you hit enter and you land on the Facebook's homepage. It's simple, right? But have you ever wondered how it works? I mean, what are behind the scenes that are involved in converting that facebook.com to that web page? Let us find out today. This magic happens not just with Facebook or Instagram or some random websites, but with every website or web page that is available on the internet. This is due to a service known as a domain name system, a domain name server, or whatever you call it, or simplified as DNS. Some call it domain name server while some say domain name system. Whatever they call it, the idea functionality of a DNS is to convert the domain names or the names that we type in the address bar to corresponding IP addresses and then vice versa. In simple terms, that means the work of DNS is to convert the domain names into the IP addresses and the IP addresses to their domain names. So it is a mapping from domain names to IPs and back. To understand clearly, first we must understand what is a domain name. So before starting the domain name system topic, we are going to explore what is actually a domain. So a domain name, or simply a domain, is a string of characters and numbers that represents a human readable address on the internet. So whatever you type in the address bar of a browser, that is readable to you, and that is a domain. These human readable addresses are necessary for us to remember because we cannot remember thousands and thousands of IPs to which we have to go to. Simply put, a domain name corresponds to an IP address that is present publicly on the internet. For example, the domain facebook.com, that is the domain name of facebook.com, corresponds to one of the Facebook's server IP. That means when you are typing facebook.com, you are trying to connect to one of the server of the Facebook, and that server might have an IP like 157.240.239.35. You can check the IP of any of the server or web page you are connected to by typing the ns lookup command inside the Windows. So it will show you the IP and the DNS properties of those websites or those web servers you are connected to. This means if you type this IP, that is 157.240.239.35, it will take you to the home page of Facebook. When you typed in facebook.com instead of the IP, it took you to the home page. Similarly, it will take you to the home page instead of typing facebook.com just by the IP. There are three different levels of domains, which involves the top level domain name, the host name, fully qualified domain name, and one more. So inside a domain is not just a single piece of text. It is a combination of usually 3 parts or 4 parts, whatever the site likes, separated by dots, and that qualifies as a fully qualified domain name. So let us see what these terms are in detail. Well, let us take an example of www.mypc.com. So this is a domain name or domain. This has 3 parts: www, mypc, and com. The first part is www, that represents the host or the host name. So mypc.com is the domain name. This one is the actual domain name. www is the host name. The last part, that is the .com, is the top level domain name. So mypc.com is a domain name, and inside that mypc.com, .com is a top level domain name. That means it represents the highest level of the domain name. When we club all of these parts, that is www.mypc.com, we are connecting host name along with the top level domain name or the domain name, and thus gives rise to a fully qualified domain name. So always remember, the part before the first dot is always the host name, and the part after the first dot is the domain name. The part after the last dot is always top level domain name, and the whole string when combined is called fully qualified domain name. So now you have gathered more than enough information about the domain name. So let's get back to the DNS or the domain name system.